There was great material prosperity in the northern kingdom. I've just picked out a few kings to highlight, so these are not to be understood to be necessarily in order. I've just picked out a few highlights. But the rule of Omri was a time of some material prosperity, and his son, Ahab. Ahab was sort of the first part of the 9th century. Omri is an interesting person because he's the first king from either kingdom to be mentioned in sources outside the Bible. We have a large stone referred to as the Moabite stone, and in this stone, which boasts of a military defeat, there's the boast that Omri of Israel was defeated. Omri bought and fortified Samaria as the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, and archaeology does reveal that this was in fact quite a magnificent city at this time. But again, the Deuteronomistic editors are going to judge him as evil. He's disobeyed God. His son Ahab also comes in for bad press. Ahab is also mentioned outside the Bible. We have an inscription of an Assyrian king who describes a coalition of Israelites and Arameans who fought against the Assyrians, and Ahab is mentioned in that inscription. Omri and Ahab were clearly very powerful and influential in the region. They are even mentioned outside the Bible. Ahab and his Phoenician wife, Jezebel, seem to have established a very extravagant court life in the capital of Samaria. And for this, they're also going to be condemned by the Deuteronomistic editors. Jezebel was Phoenician, and when Jezebel tried to establish the worship of her Phoenician Baal as the official cult of Israel, right, she built a temple to Baal in Samaria. The prophets Elijah and Elisha preach a kind of holy war against the monarchy. We're going to come back to these very zealous Yahweh-only prophets of the north when we talk about prophecy next time. Ahab and Jezebel meet a very tragic end, and there will be a military coup. A military coup led by an army general, Jehu, in about 842. These are all kind of approximate years, you know, that different books will give them, they'll differ by 5 years one way or the other, but it's our best effort at reconstructing things based on some of these outside extra-biblical references that give us a firm date, and then we can kind of work around those. So the army general Jehu, in about 842, led a military coup. He was anointed king by the prophet Elisha, and he had a very bloody revenge on Jezebel. Jezebel and the priests of Baal were all slaughtered. The text says, as well as every worshiper of Baal in Samaria. They were all slaughtered.